Hello and welcome to Planted Nutrition. My name is Luke. I'm a nutritionist, and in this video, I'm going to talk about the tricks that nutrition influencers use to trick and manipulate you. This is a good one that I think is going to help a lot of you to stop being as confused by what you see online. So let's start it out with this. What sounds more compelling to you? Yo, I have this friend, he started this new diet and he is feeling so much better. He's lost tons of weight, he's looking ripped and so good, he's working out. He said he's feeling so much better. His constipation is gone, he has so much more energy, his mental health has improved. He's just feeling in love and inspired with life. Or, in this randomized control trial, we found that people who were eating more whole unprocessed foods had lower levels of cardiovascular risk factors, such as ApoB. They also had improved blood glucose control as evidenced by the significant reduction in HbA1c. However, we've had to consider additional factors when making these results, and they may not apply to everyone. More research is needed before we can determine the health effects of this particular intervention. So here we have an extreme contrast of some good storytelling or an anecdote versus incredibly dry and boring scientific study. And I think this just illustrates this perfectly, is that there's such a divide between the science that is out there that researchers are doing and the information that's shared online regarding nutrition and health. Often researchers are really good at what they do, but they're not always the best about communicating that to the public. But it's also because when scientists communicate, they use complicated language that the average person can't understand. It sounds boring, we turn off, we don't listen. But when we see a headline in a magazine about this new diet that caused a celebrity to completely transform their health, or we hear about a friend that tried this new biohack and they're feeling so much better, these stories are much more compelling because they speak directly to us, because we can relate with them, because we maybe see those same problems in ourselves and we want to feel better too. And it's not to say that there's something bad about anecdotes. They're really good for maybe generating a hypothesis or an idea about a topic. Wow, someone did that and they did feel so much better. But we didn't hear in the anecdote that old mate had broken up with his toxic ex. He'd got a new job and was making so much more money. He finally moved into his dream house. Everything in his life was going well. And that's the thing with anecdotes, they don't tell us the full picture because a human life is so complicated and there's so many different factors that can influence our health. And so this is the key thing that I'd love for you to understand, is that a lot of these influencers online, they're master storytellers. They know how to tell stories that bring up emotional reactions, that really resonate with people, and that go well in social media algorithms from either creating outrage or creating a lot of engagement because people relate to the topic. And again, by itself, this isn't necessarily a problem. It's just when what they're sharing is completely going against what we know is important for health. Because it's true, we can find an anecdote for absolutely everything. We can find someone who says, I went vegan and it completely changed my health, I feel so much better. We can find an anecdote, someone, I went carnivore, it completely changed my health, I feel so much better. Does that mean that that's the absolute optimum best way to live and eat for our long-term health? Well, from an anecdote, we can't say anything. It's just a small change someone's maybe made in 2 weeks. Maybe they're feeling better now, but they're gonna feel terrible in a few months. Maybe they feel a lot of energy now, but they're messing up their metabolic health in the long term. And this is why it's important to balance anecdotes with research. And this gets into the next part of the video. So we have what's called the hierarchy of evidence. You can imagine it like a pyramid. At the base, we have anecdotes. So these are kind of the lowest form of evidence. They can start to inform us about maybe, okay, someone did that, maybe we should look into that and study that further and see if it plays out when we put it under more scrutiny. And often the case is that that doesn't happen. When we look at it under more scrutiny, we find that there was an extraneous variable that was influencing the results. Or maybe we find for sure that was a great result for someone, but actually this other person that maybe had different genetics, it did not work for them at all. And then the next level of evidence, we have things like animal studies, rats and mice often, and this is another thing that we hear, these extreme claims. Oh my God, they fed soy to rats and look what happened to their testosterone. But what we don't see is that it wasn't exactly soy that they were getting. It was a specific compound in soy that had been isolated and concentrated to thousands and thousands of times what anyone would ever get when they're eating it. And again, even if we do find something in rats and mice, I think we all can agree they're not humans. They're very different. They might have some similarities, but just because something plays out in rats and mice does not mean that it's going to play out in humans. And then we have our next level of evidence. These are things like epidemiological studies, so looking at a specific population in one point in time and assessing the levels of disease, or maybe following a group over time and we look at what each person did and how that predicts their risk of disease in the future, or sometimes looking back at a population and we can kind of infer what maybe happened. And again, this can be really helpful because it allows us to look at actual humans, but it's also incredibly hard to study humans because, as we've mentioned, there's so many different factors that can influence our health. And often influencers might either use this type of research to say that a certain thing that they're promoting is really good, but then on the other hand, they might also use this type of research to say it's all bullshit. Epidemiological studies are flawed and they can't tell us anything about health. So we just have to understand where they fit in the hierarchy of evidence. Again, we can maybe generate hypotheses to do more specific and more controlled studies. But this is another one to be aware of influencers using to manipulate you. And then further up, we have things like randomized controlled trials. These are the ones that maybe sound a little bit more boring, like I talked about earlier. We took a group of people and we gave them two different interventions. One was a placebo and one was the specific food that we somehow snuck into their diet. We followed them for a certain amount of time and we determined that it had this effect on these biomarkers. The thing about these studies is, while they may sound boring and less interesting, they actually can tell us a lot more because they're a lot more controlled. Researchers know how to design them, so there's less external factors that are influencing the results, and they can say with much more confidence whether or not a certain intervention is good or not and what effect that has on our bodies. Even if we have a specific randomized control trial, it doesn't necessarily give the full picture. It's like one piece in a puzzle, and sometimes we need to put the whole puzzle together in order to get the most accurate results. And this is where we have things like meta-analyses and systematic reviews. They sit at the top of our pyramid of evidence. I don't think I've seen many influencers share these. The gold standard for evidence, the thing that tells us with the most confidence about whether or not something is going to affect our health in a certain way. They don't necessarily make the headlines, and they don't necessarily make for compelling stories because they've been performed rigorously, well, hopefully most of the time, and they can give us much more confidence about the topic that has been studied. And it's not to say that these are perfect either. There's plenty of examples of reviews that have been done by people funded by a certain industry or have flaws in their scientific process. It is completely possible to cherry pick certain studies that fit a narrative. I'll link a video below of a great example of this with the topic of saturated fat, where people believe there is a bit of controversy because there have been some reviews that have come out showing it's beneficial. But when you actually look into those studies, you can clearly see the flaws in that reasoning. All of this to say is that we should probably make our decisions based upon the most rigorous levels of evidence possible. Ideally, we'd look for what are called converging lines of evidence, where we have our anecdote, which is also shown maybe in rats and mice, which was also shown when we look at large groups of people over time. And then we took them and we did a more controlled study, and we can see actually that's still playing out. And then we review all of that and we can be like, okay, for sure, we're very confident that this is what happens. And again, scientists will never say we're sure that this happens. It's always about confidence, and that's the other thing. Influencers, they sound very confident. They sound like they know what they're talking about, but often they don't. Real scientists and health professionals are a lot more humble and open to changing their views. But it's important to make our health decisions based on the best available evidence we have, because like I talked about in the beginning, if we are following an anecdote, we don't know what the long-term effects are necessarily going to be, but we've got hundreds of years of nutrition research that, while sometimes flawed, can give us really good data about what to do for our health, and there's a reason why all of the experts around the world agree on the fundamentals of a healthy diet. And for something as important as the health of your body, which is literally your home on planet Earth, that allows you to experience the miracle of life, it's not something I want to mess around with. I know this is different for everyone, but I hope this video has given you some more confidence and understanding about the information that you see online, the tricks that health and nutrition influencers use to manipulate our emotions and draw us in, while also choosing levels of evidence that don't really give us good ideas about what the effects are in humans, because they do play well in algorithms and they create sensational headlines. And it's also a call to scientists and science communicators that maybe we can learn from these people and figure out ways to make science more interesting. I'm trying my best on this channel. I know I have a long way to go, but there's always something to learn from everyone out there. And if we can make good health recommendations as compelling as some of these influencers make their claims, then we'll be well on our way to really positively impacting the health of millions and millions of people worldwide. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you are struggling with your nutrition and you need help or maybe some more clarity, I'm offering free 30-minute nutrition consultations. I'm genuinely offering these to help and support you. I know nutrition can be so overwhelming. It's taken me many years to study and understand it, but I'm here to support you if that feels like something that you need. You can book in the link in the description. Hope you've enjoyed this video. See you in the next one. Stay healthy, my friends.